Dying to be Innocent is the ninth Di and Julia mystery from JJ&EMSH Swift Hook. Julia Llewellyn was on her way home from the Escapelion on Ynys Môn at last. She had been there, or thereabouts, for most of the last 2 months, and hard as it was, she pushed down the turmoil of emotions which revolved in her stomach every time she thought about that, and focused hard on the future. Firstly, she had endured a very difficult pregnancy from mid-term on, requiring extensive bed rest, and the inevitable boredom and frustration that had meant. Despite all that, her son Rodri had still been born 6 weeks early, needing to be haled off to an incubator. Then he was discovered to have a hole in his diaphragm, requiring immediate surgery. Several sleepless nights followed, with herself and her husband keeping watch over his tiny form before he was declared on the mend. And then Julia had to wait for him to grow big enough to leave his incubator and come home. She was glad for more than the obvious reasons. Her husband, Di Llewellyn, was a sub-magistratus for the region of Dymeto and Cornovi, and she knew he was keeping something from her, holding back to protect her, as he would think. It was hard to pin him down in his brief visits. Once home she was sure she would get to do so. At last the great day had come, and she was seated decorously in the back of a burly all-wheel, being piloted by her friend and bodyguard Edbert. If she had been an expecting sort of woman, she would have expected Di to be sitting beside her, but he was conspicuous by his absence. She sighed a tiny sigh and kissed the downy head that rested on her breast. "Not his fault." Edbert's unfeasibly deep voice broke gently into her reverie. "What's not whose fault?" Julia kept her voice even for fear of waking Rodri. Edbert laughed softly. "It's not Di's fault that he isn't sitting beside you, you cross-grained little person." Julia found herself relaxing. "Catch a hot case, did he?" "Nope. Having refused to see or speak to Di or either of his senior investigators, Bryn or Gallus, for the best part of a month, Magistratus Sextus Catus Bestia called a meeting for this morning. Messaged just before we were setting out to fetch you." His voice dripped sarcasm. "If I didn't know better, I'd think it was time to cause maximum inconvenience." Julia sighed again. "He is such a petty man. I keep hoping things will improve, but it's not likely." "Isn't. And his attitude to servants is beyond despicable." Julia held the baby carefully as she leaned forward and put her hand on his shoulder. "Bestia really is a piece of work, isn't he? But he's just petty, and that can't hurt us." "I wouldn't place any bets on that." "Me neither, honestly. But I can't afford to think like that." "No, nor you can. My bad. How is the little one standing up to the journey?" "He's fine. Had his prandium before we set out. Sleeping now. The medica said something to me just before you rolled up that was very comfortable. Rodri is a fighter, and as tough as they come. She says not to treat him any different to any other baby now. He's all healed and 100% fit." One tear escaped and ran down her cheek, but it was a tear of thankfulness, not sorrow. Her precious baby was well and could take his place in the nursery, where he and his sister Elwyn would be in the care of the nursery maid Luned, who was as brave as a lioness and as tender as the touch of silk. All things considered, Julia thought today was a good day, even if the pinpricks from Di's boss were getting sharper and less disguised. She wondered if they were what was behind her beloved's withdrawn mood. The rest of the ride home passed in silence, save for Rodri's tiny snore. Just before they were due to turn onto the private road to the Villa Papaverus, Edbert stopped the car and screwed round in his seat to look at Julia with deep wisdom in his winter-grey eyes. "A word of warning. There's about 100 people waiting to greet you. If I was you, I'd wait in the all-wheel and hand the little one off to Luned before you get out. What with dogs and in-laws and that mad woman, Domina Lavinia, it'd be easy for you to take a tumble. Lunard and me put our heads together, and she's found a big old high-wheeled baby carriage so everybody can see young Rodri without crowding. For a moment Julia didn't know what to say, and she felt her throat constricting. Edbert smiled and touched her cheek with the back of one huge hand. All a bit overwhelming, ain't it? It is, and thank you, my friend. Always got your back, small stuff. Always got yours, you big ape. With the shoals of emotion successfully navigated, Edbert started the engine again.